Thanks for that, Mitch. Let me just introduce myself before we get into the details of the webinar. I'll introduce myself and the company of Hype for any of you who aren't so familiar with the work that we do. So I run Hype's enterprise innovation team at Hype Innovation, which is really the consulting, people and process part of the business. We have a consulting team that supports organizations with the process training and the consulting associated with establishing successful and sustainable programs. A little bit about Hype, for those of you who aren't so aware of the organization. We've been founded in 2001 as a spin-out of Daimler. We're headquartered in Bonn, Germany, and also have offices in places like Lyon, Abu Dhabi, London, Boston, and Berlin. We have products that support a range of different innovation management needs. The products that most organizations buy is a Hype Enterprise product, which supports the full scope of innovation, really end-to-end. And it is a very configurable, flexible platform to allow you to do all kinds of different things associated with the world of innovation management. We're not just a software company. We've found that over the time that we've been in business, it's very helpful for us to have a wider range of offerings to support the different types of needs that organizations face. So that includes, of course, the software, but also technical implementation services to make sure any platform is well integrated into a client's environment, and also some process guidance that's delivered through our innovation consulting team, my team. And that bottom right box is really where I live. Just to give you a context of my day job and the world that I live, which I think is helpful as we begin to start introducing this topic of online collaborative innovation. My day job really can be encapsulated through this statement. So sustainable and collaborative enterprise innovation programs. And I pick each of these words very deliberately. Sustainability is a crucial part. One-off innovations isn't enough. We need a sustainable process, a sustainable pipeline that's always being filled with new and creative ideas. We often find that the best ideas come from teamwork, from groups of people working together, from people bouncing against each other. Collaboration really is at the heart of everything that needs to happen when it comes to innovation. And so driving collaboration and collaborative behaviors is a crucial part of this process. And we can marry to that diversity of ideas, diversity of insights, diversity of people. Everyone can help us innovate. Everyone has a role. This is no longer just the space for research and development teams. So reaching out to wider groups, to the enterprise and even beyond is also something that the most progressive organizations are now doing. As soon as we get to enterprise scale and multi-enterprise scale, then of course we need some software to support that type of engagement. It's important that we have an enabling technology that can ensure that we can involve the right diverse mix of people, not just the people that are available on a given day in a given location. And if we apply software to an enterprise, we of course need to understand how people share and collaborate online. And so understanding the social science of how people behave is really my world. That's the space that I live in. What are the people and process considerations which help support these sustainable collaborative enterprise innovation programs? So now I have an insight into my world. Who does this? What sorts of organizations put enterprise innovation management programs in place? Well, here's a snapshot of a range of different companies in different industries. Some of these organizations are very focused on what I would consider to be traditional R&D innovation type work, so creating new products, sometimes new services or even new business models. The other end of the scale, we have organizations that have a broader view of what innovation is and maybe focus on more tactical things like continuous improvement, cost reduction, process improvements. And of course many organizations cover both of those topics as well with the same platform, although maybe not necessarily the same delivery team. Some of these organizations will also reach out to their third parties, so trusted suppliers, partners, business customers, academia, consumers even. So again, a wider view of what collaborative innovation can be and a wider, more diverse portfolio of insights. So let's look at the agenda we're focusing on today. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what's really the problem we're trying to solve. Why do organizations invest in these sorts of programs? What are the reasons, the root causes behind wanting to generate better and more differentiated ideas from the community that we have employed? We'll look at what the solution needs to deliver. So any solution, irrespective of the vendor or partner of choice, what kind of building blocks do we need? Then we'll look at how to get people engaged. Software is just software. It doesn't necessarily ensure that people share and collaborate at scale. And then we'll move into some best practices to give you some insights on how this actually works in practice. So let's look again at this problem we're trying to solve. So what are the main challenges that organizations face? Well, the top one is by far the most important, growth and efficiency. So we want to grow, we want to generate more revenues, more profit from our capabilities. We also want to be more efficient. And efficient growth, of course, is something that many of us aspire to. The level of disruption, and with that, the competitive landscape. So competition from perhaps emerging markets, from SMEs, from startups. The pace of change is only increasing, and that is meaning that the level of disruption that organizations face is seemingly even more prevalent than ever before. And of course we can also add into the mix the level of differentiation we can offer. Sometimes we find ourselves in a commodity business where simply it's a race to the bottom. Compete primarily on price, and it's very hard to find a way and an angle to differentiate well. Let's look at the growth challenge for a second. Some of you may have had a growth gap conversation with your business leaders. This is a little representation of something called the innovation growth gap. And what it tells us is that if we keep selling the same products to the same customers in the same way that we've always done, eventually our revenues will start to drop. The market will become more competitive. We will have to reduce our prices, and eventually we'll see that decline. So we can't simply sell the same stuff to the same people forever. So of course, in reaction to that, we create new capabilities, and that's represented by the light blue block there. And what we hope, of course, is those new capabilities and those new products will more than compensate for any drop-off from the existing portfolio. And well, most of us will have a target, a financial target at some point in time, and the gap between the top of that blue block and the top of the green block at any point in time is something called the innovation growth gap. Essentially, it's the job for innovators to fill. How much portfolio, how much revenue do we need our portfolio to be delivering at a point in time? And of course, not everything that we do is necessarily successful, so we need to make sure that we have a multiplier to that growth gap. So perhaps if we're in consumer goods, maybe our success rate is 1 in 3, so therefore we need 3 times that growth gap forecast at a particular point in time. Maybe if you're in pharmaceuticals, it's 1 in 7. So the job for innovators is a tough one, and this is an interesting conversation to have with your business leaders, just to check to see if we're providing sufficient investment in innovation to be able to deliver those growth targets that we have. Disruption we mentioned, there's a little some stats from KPMG from a study back in 2005, but I still think it's very relevant. If you look at those top 4 concerns, I want to pick out a couple. Top one, new entrants disrupting our business model, 74%, and that's only going to increase. The third one down, competitors' ability to take away from our organization, take business away from our organization. This again is becoming much more prevalent as organizations are faster moving, are able to be more dynamic due to new business models, due to lean approaches. This of course is becoming very, very disruptive to established players. Innovation is now perceived to be a must-have. So a range of different quotes here from different organizations. 84% of execs say innovation is critical. 6% are satisfied with performance. That's from McKinsey. Fast innovators are 18 times more likely to have 30% revenue from innovation. So the speed of innovation, of course, is crucial. There's 81% positive correlation between innovation and collaboration. That was the point I made earlier. Collaboration really is at the heart of being more innovative. Harnessing those diverse perspectives and different views has a massive role to play. And finally, only 25% of firms effectively generate and convert innovation. So the job of actually executing better, of being able to have a better innovation engine, of course, is a crucial part of this overall landscape. So those are all the sort of what the analysts say, but what else also causes organizations to want to consider harnessing the diverse perspectives of their communities? Well, a big part of it actually is also around scale and diversity of locations. Once we get beyond 10 to 15 people, it becomes inefficient to get people to collaborate in a room. Often the people we need to collaborate and share are more numerous than that, and those different perspectives may well be in different offices, potentially in different countries around the world. So of course we have collaboration techniques. We do web conferences, we do web video conferencing, we have email, but when it comes to getting the diverse insights of people on the fly, when perhaps we can't necessarily take them out of their day job, that becomes more difficult, particularly if we're exposed to different time zones. Even getting the right 15 to 20 people on a conference call at the same time, of course, is very, very difficult. So the scale and the diversity of locations is crucial. Sometimes the conversation we want to have needs to occur with maybe 1,000 or every several thousand people who all have expertise and knowledge in this particular space. How on earth do we begin to harness that? Globalization, of course, is moving our experts into different regions and territories around the world. That means different time zones, and it means this whole concept of collaborative working starts to get very, very tricky when we simply have people all over the place. We don't even know sometimes where they are, what they know, and how we can get to them. Knowledge management's been a challenge for organizations for many years. If we only knew what we knew, most of our intellectual capital walks out of the door at 5 o'clock on a Friday. What happens if they don't come back? They leave, they move to competitors. We have no idea. We have no idea what we know, and silos are meaning that we're reinventing the wheel. So this is a massive inefficiency for many organizations. And actually, if I'd like to point you at a case study on our website from Liberty Global, which talks about beginning to break down this silo mentality and getting people to share across silos within an organization where really there wasn't an awful lot of reason to do that. Knowledge management, harnessing and capturing what we know is a crucial part of this overall puzzle. One of the previous slides talked about the general inefficiency of being able to convert innovation, rigor of process. These are sorts of quotes that I hear. We don't really have a funnel, we have a pipeline. Everything that goes in gets done. There's no portfolio of choices that we're making to ensure that we have the best possible options for our organization to invest. We're not necessarily confident that we're making good decisions. So the information that perhaps we would like available isn't available or hasn't been completed to ensure that we're making the right innovation decisions at the right time. There's no governance around how we make investment choices. Again, this is a big challenge for a lot of companies. So companies are really experimenting over here and over there, but there's no one with a portfolio view. And this kind of, I think it comes back to really about, are we really punching our weight? Do we really have the new ideas we need? Have we got innovation happening in parallel in different divisions? Are we reinventing the wheel? Is there an ability in the organization to identify cross-divisional opportunities? Is there any good way to make good portfolio decisions? So all of these reasons, married to those more strategic observations from the consultancies at the front, are causing companies to say, hey, is there a better way? Is there a new way of harnessing our organization's intellectual capital, focusing that towards our innovation needs, and actually driving our business forward using this as a key engine? So those are all the problems and the issues that tend to cause organizations to think about these sorts of challenges. What would any solution need to deliver to ensure that we can help make progress down that path? Well, a collaboration platform is at the heart of it. As soon as we have the scale of the organization's globalization, more people than we can fit in the room, we need to at least systematize some elements of collaboration. Now, although collaboration online is important, it's not the only answer. We need to complement our existing techniques with things that allow people to participate when they can without taking them out of the day job. We want to ensure that people from all of the parts of the company, all of the divisions that or included in our business can share and collaborate and work together on the topics that make sense. So instead of innovation just being the job of R&D, well, what about including sales when we have a new proposition that's partially complete? We want to test and balance that before we release it to market. What about seeing if there are technology innovations that our IT colleagues may well be able to share? Being inclusive as possible, of course, it means that we get more diversity. More diversity means high levels of innovation, high levels of differentiation. And of course, once we think about the internal audiences, we also then might think about the external audiences. Not necessarily collaborating with everybody at the same time, but certainly picking those portions of the business and the portions of the external community that could work better together to deliver new ideas, new solutions, perhaps branded concepts, insights, or even best practices. What we really want at a high level is an ability to harness the right group of people on the right topics to generate the outcomes that we need. So let's break this down. I want to sort of look at a range of sort of objectives, really. We need to find ideas we already have. So harnessing our existing intellectual capital is a key part of being more innovative and exploiting that knowledge management challenge that we face. We also need to inspire people to think of new ideas. We need to ensure that people feel free to think a little bit more creatively, think how they can support the bigger organizational challenges that we face. We also need to make good decisions at a very early stage. The better our decision making can be, the better the rest of our innovation process will be. So ensuring that whatever we generate is also aligned to where the organization can reasonably commercialize those capabilities is important. We need to implement quick wins as quickly as we can. We don't want to be drowned in process when something has an ability to be executed quickly. We need to develop the ideas that need elaboration. So some ideas will need to be developed, enriched, merged with other things, and owned and basically tracked and maybe even supported with business cases. Across all of our innovation efforts, they need to be aligned to our strategic areas of focus. So ensure that where we innovate is in line with where we are practically prepared to commercialize, put things into practice. And also this will help build belief and confidence in the process within the organization, that where we're asking them to get involved, there are real people, resources and budget behind that. And finally, we need to track implementation. We need to see if we're being successful. What kind of returns are we getting on the innovation activities that we have generated? And able to loop back and refocus our program based on that information and data. And supporting all of this, we need to include external data sources, so potentially trends, we need to look at IP portfolios, a whole range of different external sources that may well contribute to our innovation efforts. Now that, as a block, is stuff that, practically speaking, a software platform can deliver. But let's look also at the process side of things and what process considerations need to go alongside that software portfolio. So remember, software is really just an enabler. It doesn't ensure people share, it doesn't ensure that people collaborate, it doesn't ensure that people share and collaborate on things that have high value, and it doesn't ensure that people do it in a sustainable way. So let's look at the process elements. We need sustainable and high quality engagement. Those are process considerations. We need flexibility when it comes to evaluation to deal with all situations, from having a small number of really well-rounded concepts to a very large bucket of ideas that have a very high level of variance in terms of quality. We need to be able to develop an active portfolio and support that portfolio with appropriate business cases that will ensure that our existing business will fund and develop new things. And that needs to be a flexible approach. Sometimes we don't need a business case at all. Sometimes we're absolutely going to need a business case to justify the level of investment that's required. We want to be able to hunt in the areas of strong potential, ensure that the sort of focus areas that we invest in are relevant to our day-to-day business. And of course, want to report on the successes, value and impact and have people comfortable sharing that information irrespective of where they are in the innovation process. This combination of the process and the software is really what's going to help deliver a sustainable, engaged community that shares and is comfortable working with us on the innovation needs that we face. So how are we going to get people engaged? Well, essentially there are sort of two major techniques. One we call push and one we call pull. The always open channel is somewhat synonymous with a Dropbox, and this is what we call a push process. We're asking people to push the ideas that they have to a central repository, and then some people will look and see if there is a need for those ideas elsewhere in the business. And we can compare and contrast that to what we call campaign-based method, or a pull method, where we actually state the problems and the needs that exist in the business and look for ideas and solutions that may well solve those. Now, in many cases, the push process, the always open channel, has a little bit gone out of fashion, and campaigns for the last 5 to 10 years have really been the most popular way of developing a program which has material outcomes and next steps clearly articulated. That's not to say that the push process can't work. For some companies, this is absolutely a method that they can use and exploit well. And the two often go hand in hand. So let's look at the details. So if we consider the campaign-based method, this gives us the ability to steer the ideation process and get the right ideas at the right time. It's question-led and it has a sponsor. So that means the sponsor will state those needs to a diverse group of people, indicate how long they have to share those ideas, and focus people in the space that they are prepared to implement. Often that means they've secured the resources up front to implement good ideas. So we're only asking questions where we have a good chance of being able to put good ideas into practice. And this leads to much higher implementation ratios than the previous method of push. Now, it may also include less diversity of ideas because we, of course, are restricting people on what they can share based upon where we can feasibly commercialize. But for many organizations, this has become the backbone of their innovation program. They give innovators a challenge, there's a much higher motivation to solve that challenge, meet that opportunity, solve that problem. But of course these processes need to be managed with some frequent communications. And we'll talk about best practices associated with campaigns a little bit later in this webinar. If we compare and contrast this to the always open channels, these are theme-based. So we set up channels based upon the topics where there are always going to be a need for ideas. So potentially that's quality, process improvements, health and safety. These topics never go away and they always have someone who's interested in the outcomes. What we don't want are themes where there is no natural owner. There's no one who's going to spend the time to look and review the ideas that are submitted. This, of course, will capture the ideas for which there are no campaigns running at this point, and it may well mean that we need to have a much higher threshold for quality. So more detail submitted by the innovator much earlier on in the process, we get a better chance of what it is that we're looking for. And we can compare and contrast that to the campaign-based method, which tends to allow people to submit really light ideas if necessary, and then push collaboration, push people to build and improve upon that to get that diversity of opinion and higher quality content. In the always open channel, we're really putting the quality threshold back onto the submitters. So that means we expect less collaboration, there's less need to do that, and a review process at regular intervals to make sure that everything that gets submitted is assessed and is processed in an appropriate way. That might mean feedback to the submitter, it might mean forwarding to other people, but everything should still get looked at wherever possible. Responsibilities for evaluations need to be clarified up front. People don't tend to share if they don't think there's a good and efficient evaluation process already in place. So we need to state perhaps that evaluations can be carried out on a monthly basis, as opposed to in a campaign where they may well happen at the end of every campaign. So just to summarize, idea campaigns really have become the backbone for many organizations' programs, and the main reason for that is the level of ROI in time. So we're getting quicker returns because the topics we're going after are in line with the day job issues that we face right in front of us. So that means we can see progress much more quickly than we can with an always open channel. They tend to attract high levels of innovation by including more diverse perspectives and asking people to collaborate. So we're getting greater diversity of opinion, greater levels of innovation, higher levels of adoption, higher levels of implementation, and then quicker ROI. And when it comes to decision making, we'll often have a combination of both the community's opinion, where appropriate, and experts making assessments on deciding what's going to be implemented and what's going to move forward. So does the approach actually deliver value? Well, yes, it does. There's a really good reason why all these companies are adopting this approach. You know, there are thousands of organizations now that have some type of collaborative innovation program here. I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but there's some really great number of examples here of clients of ours who have achieved significant returns, improvements in employee exchange and collaboration, improvements in engagement, significant material value delivered from the program, either in savings or in new capabilities launched to market. So it does work when done in the right way. Now, that's not to say it's entirely straightforward and easy, but if we get that process right and we're supported by good applications that enable that process well, then it's very effective. Let's just take a step back. Why was this campaign approach even developed? I mean, why is this actually better than what perhaps we've done before? And there's sort of two major techniques that organizations will typically think about when it comes to generating ideas. And one of them, of course, is suggestion schemes, which we touched on already, where there are some good reasons perhaps in our minds to think about suggestion schemes. We allow everyone to participate. We're not restricting the audience in any way. And anything they share, of course, can be unrestricted. Ideas on anything at all. That could be quite powerful, quite inspiring. However, the downsides are ideas are often underdeveloped. They're often limited in their scale and scope, and some poor soul has to run around and find owners for those ideas. Now, as you saw earlier, you can make that process work as long as you segment it well, you put regular evaluation processes in place, but typically implementation rates are still not strong. Then we've got the brainstorming. I don't think many people will still do brainstorming, and for many organizations this is a very popular and effective thing to do. We find the relevant experts, put them in a room and have them talk about the given topic and area of specialism. The challenge, of course, to brainstorming is we're limited by scale. We can only involve a certain portion of our audience. Suppose we have a process which includes 200 people where we develop something new at one end and we sell it at the other end. We can't put 200 people in a room, yet potentially they all have a view on that thing that we're developing. So often we exclude big portions of our enterprise just due to scale. If we can put that conversation online, that's going to help us dramatically. So these are some of the reasons why the campaign approach was used, and often is used as the backbone for many organizations' front-end innovation management programs. Other common elements: lack of alignment of ideas to what we want to do, adherence to our metrics and the KPIs that are important to us, and ensuring that they match on to what customers are prepared to buy. The campaign approach tries to mitigate the negatives and build upon the positives of these sorts of approaches. So you can see there's a sort of hybrid between the two, but enabled online, and we try and focus on improving all those negative elements we talked about. So just to sort of summarize, what is a campaign? Well, it's sponsor-led. We focus a question to a particular audience group, and we give them a limited amount of time to share. It's actually the deadlines that drive the engagement. These campaigns may run for 2 days, they may run for 2 or 3 weeks, but often a lot of the engagement comes in right at the end, just before we close the opportunity to share. And we try and choose an audience that's appropriate for the question, and that includes some deliberate diversity. As organizations, we're often very poor at tracking what people did before they came to work with us, and we don't log that information, so we often don't know who has what experiences, what they've done in their past careers or in their past roles in the company, and often these people have different perspectives on what we do than our small group of experts. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll typically offer some boundaries to where we want people to share and collaborate. Some high-level selection criteria, perhaps on how quickly something might need to be implemented, or the level of money we're prepared to invest. Just gives people a frame within which to work, and that tends to generate better quality solutions. If we combine all those things together, we can really point it at anything we like, generating ideas, sharing best practices. This is a very effective online collaboration process. In fact, I would say it's the best and most effective way of getting large or diverse groups of people to work together online. If we write good questions with a believable sponsor who cares about the topic, a deliberately diverse audience run over a relatively short period of time, and tell people what good should look like, then more often than not we will generate great results, as you saw earlier from those client examples. So let's look at this full lifecycle innovation process. So down the bottom here we have the software, and what does that mean in practical terms in terms of applications you may look at and you see? Well, firstly, you need applications that will support the strategic areas of focus. That's going to be important to ensure the idea generation that you do, be it through campaigns or idea channels, is aligned to your strategic needs. Of course, we have an idea creation phase, and then we have an evaluation phase. So we need to ensure we have tools to support that evaluation as effectively as possible. And in many cases, that green block, that light green block, is what we think about as innovation concepts, or our innovation shelf. This is the home for good and interesting things that we're working on but isn't yet ready to formally approved for implementation. And then, of course, at the end, we may well have innovation projects where we're tracking milestones, and input into that maybe all kinds of external sources of trends and inspirations and other things that may well help to inspire our idea creation, help align to strategic direction, and also help people who are sharing ideas to justify why they think their ideas are good. So instead of just saying, hey, this is my idea, it's great, actually complementing that with external justification like a trend that we're trying to adapt to. Now, that looks like a very linear workflow, and of course in reality many of our innovation day jobs do follow that kind of process, but we also need flexibility. So that idea campaign capability, which is a really good way of getting people to collaborate, is often used tactically to improve the quality of our innovation pipeline. So we might be looking at a concept and saying, this is good, but is it affordable for us to create, or is it technically viable? And running a campaign to help solve that. And I'll come on to that in a moment in terms of illustrating it a little bit more. So that's the sort of really tough part of the puzzle, getting people to collaborate and share well. It does require good software. It does require, of course, a great process. The other bits are somewhat more straightforward. But I want to dig into this evaluation piece a little bit more, because I think this is another single point of failure that a lot of organizations don't think about too much. How do we evaluate the content we've received? Should evaluators score and rank ideas? Is there a role for evaluators to help improve what we already have? Diversity within evaluation teams is useful, as is diversity within idea creation. So when we tend to think about online innovation management programs, think about the evaluation piece as a really crucial part of this puzzle. And it's the sort of thing that I will do as part of my job, is to guide evaluation teams as to what an effective process, what an effective combination of tools and processes are out there in order to support them to make good decisions. Because you can create fantastic ideas, but if you don't have a way of judging them, you don't have a way of justifying why this one's better than that one, of course you've got a single point of failure in your process. Now, evaluators can be creative. We used to keep evaluation teams apart to ensure absolute independence, but actually we find if we can put them in the same room, or perhaps put them on a WebEx, we find that there's a creative process to be had there. There's a creative conflict, people having different perspectives, talking about an idea and all the comments on it to ensure that they have some kind of common feeling for what's been submitted. If we put evaluators together and set them a deadline, we tend to find that evaluation processes are more efficient. Some companies tell me, hey, we've got great ideas, but we just can't process them fast enough. We can't get feedback on them. We can't ensure that people hear about what's happening next. And we look at their process and we see that, yeah, they haven't actually lined up the evaluation resources before they've actually generated the ideas. So then they're running around looking for appropriate people to judge them. And then they end up with whoever's available, which may or may not be the right team, and it's really hard to justify why the decision that that team has made is a good one. So instead we say, get out ahead of this. Before you generate ideas within a particular area of focus, build the process to evaluate them. Find the evaluation team that's right for the topic you're going after, and then work backwards from there. Generate the ideas where you have an ability to evaluate and then, of course, execute. Good. And making this work in practice, some general tips. Evaluation sessions can work really well in person, or even over a phone conference or a video conference if well moderated. So they do need to be organized. Time limit discussions. If you have discussions on every idea, then of course you're going to slow everything down. So discuss where you need to discuss and skip through where you need to. Triage the content, do a pre-selection, make sure that evaluators are only spending their precious time on the good stuff. Allow evaluators to read ideas and comments together. See if they have a common opinion of that idea once they've actually been exposed to all the details. Allow independent scoring and then aggregate. Again, user systems are helpful here. If we allow people to have an open discussion about something and then score independently, the process still has some rigor. And if the ideas are taking too long, if one person's taking you down a rabbit hole, park that, move on, and ensure that we're making good use of their time. These sorts of little tips will help improve your evaluation processes, and this is a key part of making sure we have an effective and efficient process. So campaigns and the associated evaluation of ideas have become very popular. They've become popular as a controllable, effective way of harnessing collective intelligence of diverse and complex groups of people. And typically we're yielding higher quality ideas because we're generating ideas in line with where we care. They're faster because we can run them over relatively short periods of time. We don't need to wait for people to be available. They're typically relatively cheap. We don't have to pull people out of the day job in order to be able to do something. So idea campaigns and their associated evaluation processes have become the backbone of many organizations' online innovation management programs for these very reasons. Anything that's high quality, faster and cheaper is typically something we care about. And just to summarize some key success factors from the whole of the presentation in terms of this particular aspect: carefully worded questions that are appropriate to the audience that we're inviting. Deliberately diverse audiences. Don't ask the same people the same questions. Pull in some different perspectives where relevant. We need to sponsor these programs. Someone who cares about the implementation. Someone who has credibility when it comes to execution. Only going after the ideas that we really need. People are busy. And what we find is if you ask them spurious questions, stuff that isn't so important, they simply never find the time. If you go after the bigger topics, the things that are top 3 agenda items for a vice president, then you tend to find they'll make more time. As I mentioned a moment ago, have your evaluation teams ready to process submissions before you start. And if you do use the campaign methodology, seed it. Put some ideas as examples in before you get going. Show what good should look like so people can get a sense of what this means. Try to make your process attractive to all personality types. You may remember that picture really early on where we had a collaboration platform and all the different divisions contributing to that. You might find that perhaps finance don't find it so interesting to talk about innovation, but if we can encourage them to join in, if we can find ways to make it possible for them to share and collaborate and play to their strengths, which are more critical, perhaps more risk-averse, but offering constructive feedback, we find we will generate better solutions and also rule out the stuff that's not so good. Deadlines and reminders are a great way of driving engagement. Often you can generate just as much content in 2 weeks as you can over a much longer period. Give people a deadline and it will go up their priority list if they care about the topic. Now you may also moderate your campaigns if you have the capacity. Show people that someone's listening. Try to develop the ideas that are shared. And this exists both in a Dropbox idea open channel as well as it does in a campaign. Moderation will help improve belief in the process as well as quality. We've got to recognize people. Pick out the people that offer you great content. Pick out the people who build upon the content of others and make it better. Recognize with equal merit both groups. That way we will drive more collaboration, more belief in the process, and you'll find better developed solutions. Make sure we communicate any next steps and any newsworthy progress. People want to know what happened. Did we generate something that was good? Are we now in an execution phase? Have we moved out of proof of concept? Keep people in the loop. It doesn't have to be vast amounts of communications, but just newsworthy items. And use different types of campaigns to generate more engagement. So maybe a problem-solving campaign is useful here, or maybe a creative campaign is useful there. If you're interested in what I mean by campaign types, I'm going to come on to that in a moment, just in a little bit more detail before we run out of time. Now, selecting the right audience is a key part of this puzzle. And this is true of any type of innovation activity. What we're really looking for is a good balance of cross-functional teams, people with different perspectives. So if you're talking about this sort of process with your organization, one of the biggest things to get across to them is this deliberate diversity, which is where an awful lot of the value is. And a way of pulling in these deliberately diverse audiences is to go after different types of campaign. So we can have a creative campaign. That's going to appeal to the more creative types. We can have a problem-solving campaign, which appeals to the helpers, the people that are good at looking at how things may work in practice. We can look for a discovery campaign where we're pulling in rare expertise to help support particular tough challenges that we face. We can test things that we're already working on with people to see if they're as good as they can be. And then we can gather feedback from perhaps our customer-facing staff. And these sorts of techniques are very good ways of ensuring that we pull in the broadest range of people as possible. Now I'm conscious of time, and this is obviously a fun subject to talk about, but I'm going to bring this this session to an end. If you want to know more about these typical use cases in both an efficiency space or an innovation space, just contact me and I can talk to you a little bit more about these different types of use cases. But I'm just going to summarize now, and before we open up for a quick round of questions. Online innovation management is really now a proven technique to support creation of new capabilities, efficiency improvements, and improve employee engagement levels, which often are embarrassingly poor. It's a very effective process that will help engagement and generate high-quality content and ensure that we have sustainability. It does require some flexibility in the software platform. I haven't touched too much about that today. If you're interested more in the software, again, just flag a note in the questions and we'll come back to you later. So thanks for listening. I'm conscious that we have quite a few questions here, and I probably don't have time to answer them all, but I'll see how I do. So feel free, any final questions that you have to offer. I'm just going to pick out a couple here. Okay, so we have a question on external audiences. How easy is it to really include third parties? So this is an interesting question. Obviously, most organizations, when they're establishing these sorts of programs, they will focus on internal audiences first. They will get good at this. They'll implement best practices. They'll iterate their approach so it's meaningful for them. And then they'll start looking at the external sources. Now, some external groups are easier than others. Typically, you'll find suppliers as being more open to these sorts of approaches than others, partners again, customers, consumers more challenging. Depends on the type of industry you're in and the type of relationship that you have with your third parties. So if you're in a consumer business and you're simply a commodity, it's often much harder to engage people in these sorts of processes. If you're interested in an example, you can take a look at Mattel, My Fisher-Price Ideas. It's actually quite a nice example of a toy company including external customers and consumers in their innovation process. And you'll see that that Mattel process is pretty effective, but it is tougher. Many of the supplier-focused programs are more challenging, are more straightforward, but perhaps not shared so much. We have a webinar on open innovation. You might want to take a look at that for some examples of supplier-focused online collaboration. Okay, so another question here, how many campaigns is too many? Well, this really does depend on the scale of your organization and the level of resources you have. Campaigns are relatively straightforward to run. Once you've run a couple, you get pretty good at them quite quickly. But you have to put yourself in the seat of the recipient, of the regular employee. What you don't want is 5 campaigns landing on their desk. It's simply too many. You'll get a dilution of effort. And that dilution is obviously problematic because what tends to happen is people focus on the one topic that they're really interested in and they tend to leave the others alone. So what we tend to say is think about it from an employee perspective. You will have some limit in terms of your capacity as a team or as an individual, how many you can run, but think about it as a recipient. If I've got 5 on my desk, that's simply too many. We need to probably reduce that down to about 3, and in the early stages maybe we do 1 or 2 at a time and build up people's confidence in the approach as we go. Okay, so yeah, another question here which I think is interesting. Hints on how to cope with requests to customize campaigns to very specific requirements and desires. Well, this is quite a big subject, but I'll try and give you a kind of quick overview in the few minutes we have left. The first thing I'd say is the question is everything. The type of question that you ask will create very different responses from your audience. So your first customizable element, which is a process element, is your question. The next most customizable element is how you ask people to respond, essentially your idea form. Now if you have a long, complex idea form, that's going to reduce engagement quite dramatically, but it's also going to increase the quality of the submissions because only the most committed, only those with the most rounded solutions are going to submit their ideas. So if you're prepared to accept real diverse types of content, fragments, then you may well, of course, offer a much simpler submission form. So there's a quality-quantity payoff. Now you might say, well, I'm only interested in the best ideas. I only want the highest quality ideas, and I understand that and I have sympathy for it. But in some cases, it's good still to offer a very simple submission form and get people through the process. Because what can happen within a campaign context is you tend to find that one person submits something, and someone comments on it, and someone else builds upon that. And the quality, although not there at the first point, actually builds as the discussion begins to emerge. So your second fundamental customization is essentially how much rigor you ask the submitter to put in. That will have a quality-quantity payoff. Now there's a third area, which is how do we communicate and what's our timeline. So the timeline iterations are really quite interesting. If we run these always open campaigns, they tend to bubble along at a relatively low level of utilization, or always open channels. If we compress that cycle, we tend to find that engagement levels are much higher, but for short periods of time. All engagement is a result of the communications. So we'll typically use reminders strategically placed throughout that campaign running time to drive engagement. So that's another configurable way of adapting the campaign type to what you're looking for. The other thing you might want to think about are those campaign modes. Different types of campaign will pull in different types of people. So it's not just the question, it's the mode that will pull in a different type of set of behaviors. So perhaps a testing campaign where we say, this is something we want to do, we like it, but is it as good as it can be? That's going to pull in people who have a more critical eye, who may be a risk averse, people who can see how it can be put into practice, less of the creative types. That's going to, again, drive a different kind of reaction. Now, I'm afraid I haven't answered all of your questions. There's a great question here that I'd love to get to about NGOs, but I will deal with that separately after our deadline because we're really coming up to the top of the hour. Thank you to everyone for attending. As I mentioned, this webinar will be available as a recording on our site for you to look at afterwards. I'm always happy to get questions. Follow me on Twitter if you wish, or send me an email if there's anything you'd like to follow up on. I'm aware that we've only sort of really touched on certain slices of the process, but I hope it was of interest to you. And for those of you whose questions I haven't got to, I will certainly email you in the coming days with a complete answer to your question as best I can.